During the ascent of the Third Reich, the top officials of the National Socialist regime lived lives defined by extravagance, wealth, and privilege. Thanks to highly efficient administrative and economic systems, they accumulated vast fortunes and embraced a lifestyle reminiscent of Europe's old aristocracy. Palaces, grand estates, armored trains, bespoke automobiles, and extensive art collections formed the everyday surroundings of figures like Adolf Hitler, Hermann Göring, and Heinrich Himmler. The Führer's inner circle resided in imposing residences such as Carinhall, Göring's estate in the Prussian forests, or the Berghof, Hitler's alpine retreat in Bavaria. They traveled in lavish armored Mercedes-Benz 770 KS, symbols of power and refinement. While Hitler used his custom train, the Führersonderzug, outfitted as a mobile command center with conference rooms and defensive features. Their daily routines included banquets with fine silverware, imported wines, and hunting expeditions for the party elite. They vacationed in exclusive spas like Bad Gastein or at the resort complexes of Obersalzberg, always surrounded by confiscated artworks, designer furniture, and a retinue of personal servants living monuments to the opulent homes of the Reich's leaders. During the rise of National Socialism, high-ranking Nazis enjoyed unprecedented wealth, rivaling that of Germany's former nobility during the monarchy. This was reflected in the lavish residences of Hitler and his trusted lieutenants such as Göring. Indeed, Göring possessed one of the most remarkable estates of the Nazi era, Carinhall. In 1933, the Prussian state granted Göring approximately 120 hectares of land for his lifetime use as minister-president of Prussia. This forested region, one of the largest in Germany, was already considered among the country's most scenic areas. Göring began constructing a vast estate complex with a mansion designed to host Nazi leadership. In 1937, the new Carinhall was officially inaugurated. The property had evolved from a simple hunting lodge into a sprawling woodland mansion, featuring a two-story main building with two wings, centered around a large courtyard accessed via an avenue lined with ancient trees. The original main building, known as the Große Halle, served for entertaining guests by a grand fireplace with panoramic forest views. Adjacent rooms, called the Gold Hall and Silver Hall, displayed gifts from nobles and wealthy patrons. The mansion was encircled by gardens adorned with life-sized bronze animal statues, and every window offered breathtaking views of lakes and forests. Göring and his wife lived in the central structure, while the left wing contained a music room, library, gym, sauna, and indoor pool. The right wing accommodated guests, dining spaces, a kitchen, and staff quarters, which were comfortable and well-furnished due to Göring's reportedly benevolent treatment of his personnel. The interiors of Carinhall showcased luxury and intricate design, with polished marble floors, expensive rugs, and paintings by Kranich and Rubens, often layered 3 or 4 deep. Hitler's own living arrangements were comparatively more reserved, though still luxurious. He resided in a spacious apartment at 16 Prinzregentenplatz in Munich's Bogenhausen district, occupying the entire third floor of a 5-story Jugendstil building designed by architect Franz von Popp between 1907 and 1908. He moved there in 1929, but in January 1935, he commissioned Atelier Tietz to renovate it at the exorbitant cost of 120,000 Reichsmarks, over 10 times the average annual salary. By April 25, 1935, the Daily Telegraph reported on the renovations, emphasizing that Hitler personally supervised the work and designed the furnishings. Nazi propaganda portrayed Hitler as a patron of German art and music, decorating the apartment in blue, gold, and white hues inspired by Wagnerian opera, and furnishing it in a matching style. The apartment served not only as a residence, but also as a venue for political negotiations, including decisions that led to the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia and plans for the invasions of Poland and France. As Hitler consolidated power, he spent increasingly less time in Munich, splitting his time between the old chancellery, military command centers, and the Berghof. Soon after completing the Munich apartment renovations, he expanded and transformed his modest Obersalzberg chalet into the Berghof, a vast, heavily guarded alpine residence. The redesign, overseen by Bavarian architect Alois de Gano and executed by Atelier Tietz in collaboration with Hitler, featured interiors that showcased Hitler's intended image as a cultured and capable statesman. The Berghof became a backdrop for photographs portraying him interacting with children and animals, reinforcing his cultivated public persona. Here, Hitler entertained royalty, diplomats, military leaders, and politicians, negotiating the European power dynamics necessary for his vision of a greater German Reich. The centerpiece, the Great Hall, symbolized his authority not as a former corporal inciting rebellion or a ruthless dictator, but as a sophisticated, commanding leader. Hitler spent more than a third of his 12-year rule at this mountain retreat, even as World War II unfolded, using it as a military headquarters and command center. Beyond real estate, Hitler amassed vast wealth, including German bank deposits and secret Swiss accounts, accumulating fortunes long before rising to national leadership. While maintaining a public image of austerity, he privately enjoyed opulence and luxury. He strictly controlled the income he received from the articles he wrote from the publishing rights of his photographs. Hitler considered himself a genius who had not been recognized, and with the aim of changing that situation, he became interested in power, money, and his own progress up the social ladder. More than once, Hitler himself meticulously described his poverty and hardships while striving to become an artist in Vienna before the First World War. Although he had received a small inheritance, being poor deeply embarrassed him. In his book Mein Kampf, from which he earned millions in Lavish, emphasized the struggle for existence of the newly rich who, according to Hitler, through their own effort, had achieved a higher social position, one that suppresses all compassion and eliminates any feeling for the misery of those who fell out of the system. More than once, Hitler demonstrated that becoming rich was one of the major goals of his life. However, Hitler also spent millions on generous gifts and contributions to buy the loyalty of politicians and businessmen, with the intention of making them dependent on him. But later, he would recover all those expenses with interest. In his role as Führer, Hitler made almost no distinction between his own money and that of the Nazi Party, and even the state coffers. There is much evidence of the Führer's morbid tax evasion and financial corruption. In his summer residence in Obersalzberg, Bavaria, or in his own collection of artworks, Hitler freely used state funds and never paid taxes. If we take as a reference what he should have earned as the head of state of Germany, Hitler should have made around 7,800,000 Reichs marks from the Third Reich. However, it is now known that from the moment he became chancellor in 1933 until his death, he amassed a tremendous fortune of 700 million Reichsmarks, more than 3 billion in today's value. Much of this money came from shady deals with businessmen, overpricing agreements, theft and expropriations from Holocaust victims, and acts of corruption in which he embezzled the Reich's treasury. After the war, Hitler's properties and assets, including a house in Munich that he had built for Eva Braun, were handed over to the Bavarian state by the Allies. Hitler had no children, and although he died without direct heirs, his deceased half-sister, Angela Rahl, did have them. And there are other descendants of Hitler's mother who live in the Waldviertel region in northern Austria. These presumed heirs asked Va Maza, a popular German historian of the Nazi period, to review what rights they might have. Although since they never agreed among themselves, there have been no legal claims so far to reclaim the assets which continue to belong to the German government. Fury and Mercedes-Benz, the luxurious cars of Nazism. Among the luxuries that Hitler enjoyed as leader of the Nazi Party were the finest cars that Germany could produce, the Mercedes-Benz. To this day, they are among the most elegant and best designed cars in the world. The relationship between Hitler and the automobile manufacturer would last nearly 2 decades, and the company would produce numerous vehicles and other equipment for the German Wehrmacht. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there was no doubt that German engineering held a leading and dominant position. Although Germany's manufacturing and industrial output could not match that of the United States, the fact that automobiles could be developed for the first time in Germany demonstrated a genuine capacity for imaginative engineering that would find real competition in only a few Western countries during the first half of the 20th century. The name Mercedes came from one of the company's sales agents, Emil Jelinek, who in the early 20th century was dissatisfied with the short-wheelbase Daimler engine cars. Jelinek, an Austro-Hungarian consul in Germany, had a penchant for speed. Working as a Daimler sales agent in Nice, France, Jelinek ordered a new model, promising to personally purchase the first 36 units, provided that the name of his eldest teenage daughter appeared on the car. He even changed the family surname to Galan Mercedes in 1903. The three-pointed star emblem, inspired by Gottadel Daimler, symbolizes land, air, and sea transport. Ferdinand Porsche joined Benz and became chief engineer in 1923. Due to the severe crisis affecting Europe, the two companies merged in 1926 to become Daimler-Benz. The cars produced at Daimler soon came to be called Mercedes-Benz as well, sometimes abbreviated as EMS in automotive literature. Porsche created the supercharged Mercedes series, of which the Skull Supersport Kurz liked Beckemeth epitome of performance. Its distinctive sound was attributed to the so-called elephant blower supercharger, which produced a powerful roar by nearly doubling the power. In 1929, Dr. Hansnabel took over as chief engineer and developed the Mercedes-Benz 500,000 and 540K, which became legendary for their performance and aesthetics. Hermann Ahrens was the in-house body designer in Sindelfingen, where EMS 512 DB600 engines were later built for Luftwaffe planes like the Messerschmitt 109. These cars became a symbol of the SS, and several customized versions were used by the highest-ranking officers. Hitler had good reason to be proud of his country's finest automobile. In 1939, when Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact, Hitler gifted a supercharged Mercedes-Benz Roadster with a rear seat to Joseph Stalin. After the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, breaking the non-aggression pact, Stalin refused to use the car and gave it to one of his generals. Hitler used a total of 5 convertible touring cars off the 770,000 type for his entourage in Germany. However, the Führer himself traveled in a hardtop, heavily protected car. The fact that Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sevo in 1914 while riding in a convertible Mayhave influenced Hitler to always use closed Mercedes-Benz sedans unless he was parading for show. This precaution was confirmed after the assassination of General Reinhard Heydrich in Prague in 1942 in a convertible. Afterward, Hitler ordered 20 armored EMS 540,000 sedans. Hitler had already opted for heavily armored limousines and had previously ordered 2 more 770,000 models. The 770K model was known as the Grosser Mercedes Offner Terrain with its inline 8-cylinder engine of 7,655 centimeters, a single overhead camshaft and dual carburetor producing 230 horsepower when the supercharger was activated. The vehicle could reach 193 km/h despite weighing 4,500 kilograms. Its massive weight was partly due to additional 6 mm armor on the floor and 3 mm armor on the doorsides, well as 40 mm thick bulletproof glass. There were 3 foldable seats behind the driver's seat, allowing the car to accommodate a total of 9 people, fully upholstered in leather. I had a 5 and raised floor on the right side, so that Hitler would appear taller when standing. The front seat folded back to give him more space while standing in that position. The car had a 51-gallon fuel tank and a range of 150 mi, but could achieve only 3 meters per gallon in the city. The car also featured independent spring suspension on L4 wheels, dual-system power brakes, and 8.25x7 in tires. Hitler ordered another fully enclosed Mercedes 770,000 in 1943, equipped with a reinforced steel roof with armor in addition to the armor and amenities of his previous cars. Hitler wanted to convey to the world the superiority of German engineering. At that time, Germany lagged behind in motorization. Hitler promised the German people that he would rapidly develop the automotive industry and launched a program to quickly build a network of highways, the first of which was inaugurated in May 1935. With government support, Mercedes-Benz doubled its production from 6,000 cars in 1932 to 12,000 in 1934. By 1935, that figure had more than doubled again, reaching 25,000, while the exact number of armored 770K cars manufactured by the German company is unknown. It is known that other high-ranking Nazis such as Göring, Himmler, and Goebbels had their own models at their disposal. Steel Colossi, the Führer's impressive armored trains. Steel Colossus cars were not the only excessively protected means of transport used by the Nazi hierarchs. The Vorratsandero, or Führer's special train, was the means of transportation Adolf Hitler used for his long journeys across Germany and Europe. Its history dates back to 1937, when Hitler commissioned a special train from Deutsche Reichsbahn for his travels. After 2 years of development, the train was ready by August 1939. It was initially named Führersandandu, Americaned, later Brandenburg. During the war, the train served as the Führer's mobile headquarters until the Balkan campaign. However, Hitler continued traveling on it throughout the war between his headquarters. The train weighed 1,200 tons and reached a maximum length of 430 meters. It could travel at speeds between 80 and 120 km. The carriages were not armored, but were standard transport wagons adapted to meet the Führer's needs. For example, Hitler's private carriage included a marble bathroom reinforced with a concrete cover to prevent assassination attempts. The carriages were built in 1930 seconds by 3 German companies, Henkel and Son, Krauss, Maffmann, and Kred. The interior was designed by a well-known Munich firm in a simple Art Deco style. Each carriage was equipped with heating and air conditioning, something quite unusual at the time. The configuration of the train varied depending on the needs and the number of people on board, from 10 to 16 wagons and a length between 300 and 430 meters. That train could carry more than 200 people. However, the layout of the main wagons remained unchanged, as they included the defense and communications wagons as well as Hitler's personal carriage. The exact composition of the train is unknown, but historical studies show that the train was equipped with locomotives, allowing the convoy to operate even if one engine failed. However, since they used steam engines, the locomotives had to be replaced every 200 kilometers with a new one loaded with coal. On both sides of the train was an anti-aircraft vehicle, the SDP-L4A39, each equipped with 2 Flakwagen 384-barreled anti-aircraft guns with central space for the crew and ammunition to defend against ground and air attacks. The 20mm anti-aircraft cannons had a range of up to 4.7 kilometers on the ground and 2,500 meters in height with a firing rate of 800 rounds per minute. Hitler's personal car, or Führerwagen, was a Pullman car and included an antechamber guarded by 2 bodyguards, a lounge with a large table and maple veneer sofas, Hitler's bedroom with a simple single bed, a marble bathroom, 3 guest rooms, a shower room, and another antechamber with 2 more bodyguards. The command and communications car included a conference room and was equipped with all the most modern communication devices, a strategy room and telecommunications rooms with printers and encryption devices, a telephone switchboard for internal and external calls, and a radio room with an Enigma machine to encode and decode messages. The rest of the train consisted of wagons for SS personnel, political entourages, and guests. This train played a leading role in the Second World War. On September 3, 1939, America was used for the first time as a war headquarters and allowed Hitler to closely follow the campaign in Poland with his staff. In October 1940, Hitler used his special train to travel to France, where he held several diplomatic meetings. In April 1941, that train was parked in Monischkirchen, a small town near Vienna, where Hitler commanded the attack on Yugoslavia after Mussolini's failed attempt to conquer Greece. He celebrated his 52nd birthday there with his team. In August 1941, Hitler and Mussolini met at Anlagacid to discuss the management of the campaign against the Soviet Union. This facility consisted of two reinforced tunnels built 30 kilometers apart to protect two trains from potential bombings. Hitler's train was parked in the tunnel, and Mussolini's in the Stepina tunnel. Finally, on May 7, 1945, after Hitler's death, the SS decided to blow up and burn his personnel carriage near Malnitz. Another major Nazi railway project was the Breitbahn or broad gauge railway proposed by Adolf Hitler during the height of the Nazi regime. It was intended to use double-decker cars to connect the major cities of Großdeutschland, the expanded Germany Hitler envisioned after conquering Europe. Germany grew under the fist of Nazism. Commercial and civil traffic increased due to economic incentives, and German railways faced a serious capacity problem. As a result of this situation, and partly driven by his military goals, the government began preparing plans to modernize the railway network and increase its transport capacity. Hitler believed that the internationally used standard gauge was obsolete and too narrow for the full development of the railways. Furthermore, his vision of the future German Empire as essentially Allen-based empire led him to imagine the new railways as a terrestrial equivalent to the ocean liners and cargo ships that connected the British Empire. Hitler accepted a suggestion from Fritz Toter gauge railway of high capacity with a significantly wider track gauge, reaching 3 m. The objections from railway experts were numerous. For example, they foresaw difficulties in introducing a new gauge incompatible with the existing one. They proposed building quadruple standard gauge lines instead, and couldn't envision any use for the vast transport capacity of such a railway. However, these objections were ignored by Hitler, who ordered the first Bourbon Linesto be constructed between Hamburg, Berlin, Nuremberg, Munich, and Lindsey. However, it never developed beyond the planning of the line and some initial topographic work. Due to the economic reparations imposed on Germany after its defeat in the First World War, the German railway company Deutsche Reichsbahn lacked the money for proper expansion and sufficient maintenance of its track network and rolling stock for several years. Moreover, the new locomotives and carriages were extremely expensive to prototype. So, the project was forgotten as Germany began to lose the war. The Nazi culture of looting, the Nazi culture of looting, unscrupulous theft of art and artifacts. Of all the disgraceful art thefts in history, the one perpetrated by the Third Reich was the most monumental, with the looting of more than 20% of European art by the end of World War II, in part due to the systematic attack on modernism and in part derived from Hitler's desire to open a Forum museum, a sort of universal art museum in his hometown Linz, Austria, where he would exhibit all the most valuable and acclaimed works of European art. Members of the Nazi Party began looting and hiding artworks in places like the Museum in Paris, the Nazi headquarters in Munich, as well as in caves and mines in Merkers, Altaway, and Schön. This attack on culture prompted an allied response, and volunteers began to hide and protect works in national institutions. All the private collections were often confiscated as they had little protection. From the Louvre Museum in Paris to the British National Gallery, workers and resistance volunteers began relocating artworks to shelters to protect them from Nazi looting. From rural monasteries to a vast slate quarry in Wales, European art was hidden in the most unexpected places to preserve the cultural heritage of numerous countries and centuries. Despite these efforts, Nazi interest in arthouses of artworks were stolen from individual and institutional owners, circulating through the homes and professional offices of some of the most influential members of the Nazi movement. Motivated by Hitler and Goebbels, the Nazi Party's interest in art arose early on, and the confiscation of works began in 1938. The Nazis wanted to rid Germany of art created during the Weimar Republic, the period from 1924 to 1930, the time when Germany was a major European cultural center, especially in fields of art, cinema, and literature. The decadence of Weimar sparked Nazi anger, and Hitler began closing art schools in 1933, aiming to purge so-called degenerate art from German public institutions. Among the artworks considered degenerate by the Nazis were modern French and German artists in the realms of Cubism, Expressionism, and Impressionism. Approximately 16,000 pieces were removed, and by 1938 the Nazi Party had declared the purge of all German art museums. Following the Nazi purges, state-sponsored exhibitions of this art were organized to clarify to Germans which types of modern art were now acceptable in the new German Reich. Shortly thereafter, in 1939, a public auction of 126 degenerate artworks was held at the Fischer Gallery in Lucerne, Switzerland, to raise funds for the party. The auctioned paintings by modern masters, many of which had previously been removed from German public institutions, included works by Van Gogh and Matisse. Hitler wanted a new wave of cultural and artistic creativity to emerge in Germany with a race-conscious perspective of Nazi culture, replacing what he called the Jewish decadence of the Weimar Republic. According to the Nazis, acceptable and desirable art included Flemish and Dutch Old Masters, medieval and Renaissance German artworks, Renaissance and Baroque Italian pieces, 18th-century French artworks, and 19th-century German realist painters. The plundering of art, initially grounded in ideological motives, eventually became a systematic state policy. For Nazi officials seeking status and career advancement within the party, acquiring and donating artworks served as a demonstration of their commitment to promoting the regime's racial doctrines. It was also a means of emulating figures like Hitler and Göring. However, some senior Nazis diverged from this pattern. For instance, Joseph Goebbels, the Reich Minister of Propaganda, collected pieces by German expressionists, while Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop acquired impressionist works by Manet. The first formal rounds of Nazi art confiscation began in Austria following the 1938 annexation, and in 1939, the seizure of artworks extended to Poland. Nazi administrative offices were soon established in the occupied territories to oversee these appropriations. Collections owned by prominent Jewish families in Vienna were among the earliest targets, and Jews who remained in Greater Germany were obliged to register all personal property with local authorities. Artworks quickly became a form of currency, used to pay for exit visas and taxes. Many persecuted individuals and political opponents attempted to flee Germany in the mid-1930s, and with the export of paper currency banned, wealthy immigrants often invested in art. Because of restrictions on foreign money, artworks functioned as a secure and liquid alternative to cash. By 1939, art could only leave Germany as personal property. Consequently, art served as currency for slave traders, Nazis, non-Nazi profiteers, and even victims of persecution seeking safe assets. European art dealers capitalized on uninformed or misled clients in occupied regions, exploiting both occupiers and the occupied alike. Many of the most prominent art houses were Jewish-owned, and some proprietors were art dealers. In April 1938, Göring issued the decree on the Declaration of Jewish Property, mandating that every Jew in the Reich inventory all domestic and foreign holdings by June 30, 1938, and report them to Nazi authorities. Confiscated art was often allocated to private Nazi or German collections, while some pieces were sold to neutral nations such as Switzerland to fund further acquisitions and supply the Nazi war effort. Switzerland also offered a thriving market for degenerate art. During the war, Paris remained the most active art market, with auction houses and dealers selling pieces at inflated prices to German buyers. The Netherlands became another frequent target for looting, while Italy's art market was similarly exploited, with dealers overcharging Germans and profiting excessively. As the war progressed, the Nazis organized the transport of stolen works back to Germany and Austria, storing them in salt mines and caves to shield them from Allied bombings. These underground locations offered ideal conditions for preserving paintings and sculptures. By 1945, The Allies discovered numerous official and hidden repositories containing thousands of invaluable artworks and artifacts, most of which were eventually recovered through extensive cultural restitution programs that continue today. Beyond their crimes, the Nazis displayed a keen sense of aesthetics, propaganda, and disciplined military presentation, pursuing a vision of visual and stylistic supremacy. The striking uniforms of the SS became the most visible expression of this pursuit of dominance. To understand this obsession with identity and appearance, one must consider early 20th century Germany, a period when the population struggled to establish a cohesive national identity. This was partly a result of the unification of diverse states under Otto von Bismarck, creating a vast territory of similar, but not fully unified customs and communities. This was reflected in the soldiers' uniforms, which were all different from one another. One of the most important aspects of a uniform is precisely to generate a sense of belonging among those who wear it. By the time World War I arrived, although all soldiers of this forming Germany wore a single outfit and color, that attire lacked identity. The National Socialist Party emerged to restore pride in the German people after being defeated and humiliated by the victors of the First World War. This people bore the stigma of having caused the war, which led the international community to shun them and impose exorbitant repression. It was not a good time to be German, and many people were ashamed of it. It was precisely in that gap of self-esteem that the Nazi Party found its opportunity to rally the masses of Germany. Hitler understood clearly they had to give the population a sense of belonging. That is why, to consolidate a strong Aryan identity, he needed, among other things, the right uniform. Many historians and experts argue that there is a general fantasy surrounding uniforms, as they suggest community, order, competence, and legitimate. This view gives the attire tremendous significance, implying that wearing it authorizes the atrocious acts that Germans would carry out. In more blunt terms, the uniform makes the Nazi, transforming him into a being for death and destruction. Adolf Hitler began this ascetic reform with his personal troops and militia, the SS. This group of loyal soldiers served as the Führer's confidants and private guard. Given that early in his rise to power, he could not fully trust the German army. Its two main branches were the Allgemeiner SS, or General SS, and the Waffen-SS, the Armeds. The Allgemeine SS was responsible for enforcing Nazi Germany's racial policy and acted as a general police force, while the Waffen-SS were combat troops within the German armed forces. A third group, the SS Totenkapende, operated the concentration and extermination camps and were the forces in charge of the most inhumane tasks of the Third Reich. This select group of loyal servants began wearing the classic and elegant black uniform adorned with the SS symbol and the characteristic skull, which would go down in history as the military attire of Nazism. Leaving aside that the SS was undoubtedly one of the most sinister, cruel, and inhumane paramilitary forces in history, it is irrefutable that their uniforms were among the most elegant ever created. There are reasons, coldly calculated by the German leaders, why this was so. Firstly, it was not just an outfit. It was crafted extremely professionally, meaning it was a high-quality product. Depending on the rank and hierarchy, each uniform had its variants for formal events, parades, or combat. The Nazis loved symbolism and visual appeal. They wanted to be proudly recognizable, as they believed they were the superiores. That's why they pursued the idea of turning the aesthetics of the Third Reich into something iconic. The Nazi leaders, and particularly Adolf Hitler, an aspiring artist, knew the power of image and understood that to make a powerful impression on the world, they needed a monumental propaganda machine, the cultural production of Nazi Germany, beyond its nefarious ideology, has been respected afterward, from cinema to photography to the visual arts and music. And all this culture and its figures had to be dressed uniformed in a way that made them look superior, like the leaders of the planet. The minds behind the design of these uniforms were the artist Karl Debicke and the graphic designer Walter Heck, both fervent followers of the Nazi regime. However, one key piece was still missing. One of Hugo Boss' greatest clothing designers in history, Hugo Boss. In April 1931, when Hitler had not yet come to power, Boss decided to enlist in the Nazi Party. His membership number was 58,889. There, the tailor realized that the big business lay in outfitting Hitler's troops. By 1933, Hugo Boss had already decided that his future would be to supply clothing for the Waffen-SS, an elite corps created by Hitler for high protection. The SA, a paramilitary organization of the National Socialist Party, and the Hitler Youth in its entirety. From that moment on, Orders 8th small workshop multiplied until years later in 1935. Boss decided to abandon civilian clothing production and dedicate himself exclusively to manufacturing uniforms. At that time, accounting for all branches of Nazism, the workshop was producing more than 3 million of these outfits. In 1939, with invasion of Poland, the brand grew exponentially as orders came in to outfit Hitler's new soldiers and citizens. Boss had already become one of the richest businessmen in all of Germany. The small workshop in Metzingen had become the second most important textile company in the Reich, generating millions in profits each year. As the war spread across Europe, most of the workshop's workers were called to the front lines. However, none other than Hitler's troops came to his aid. They supplied him with around 200 prisoners from concentration camps, mostly Jews, to be used as slave labor, a resource the textile entrepreneur did not hesitate to exploit. With the end of the war, things changed drastically for Hugo Boss, who went from being a recognized businessman to being accused of collaborating with the Third Reich. The businessman was declared a beneficiary of the Nazi regime, and his company was classified as important in the economic structure of Hitler's dictatorship. These two accusations led to Boss losing his right to vote and being fined 100,000 Reichsmarks, about $213,000 today. While it is true that the company participated in the growth of Nazi Germany, it was not found guilty of crimes against humanity. Bourgeois vices, the mistresses of the top leaders of the rich. Although the Nazis valued and promoted traditional family values, there are hidden stories that show their style was more do as I say, not as I do. Propaganda encouraged German women to be faithful to their husbands, to raise many children, and to stay at home taking care of the household. While the Nazis did not reject extramarital sex, they usually recommended relationships for reproductive purposes. The Reich needs children, the radio would proclaim in middle and upper class homes. However, the Nazi leaders with extreme power and influence were known to have several affairs that, despite being shrouded in secrecy, eventually come to light. The first case worth mentioning is that of Heinrich Himmler, who had 2 children with his secretary. Himmler was the head of the infamous SS, a special force that functioned as Hitler's paramilitary right hand, and also as bodyguards to the major figures of Nazism. The sinister man was the chief architect of the Holocaust, namely systematic enslavement and slaughter of more than 6 million Jews. According to several rumors, Himmler remained a virgin until his mid-20s. It is believed that the Nazi leader was afraid of sex, although it is unclear whether this stemmed from an old teenage trauma or was a personal ideological choice. Many historians lean toward the latter, as in 1928, Himmler married Margaret Boden, and the couple had a daughter named Gudrun. In the early years, the marriage was happy, but as Himmler gained more power, he began to lose his scruples. In 1939, he started an affair with his secretary, Hedwig Pott, nicknamed Bunny, who was 12 years younger than him. The romance lasted 4 years and was quite fruitful and passionate. They had 2 children together, Helga and Nanette Dorotha. To spend more time with Bunny, Himmler built her a house in Berchtesgaden, a popular vacation area for the Nazis. According to Himmler's inner circle, the Nazi was truly in love with Bunny and not with his wife. Those close to the leader claimed that his young lover made him more relaxed and human. Needless to say, by the time their second baby arrived, everyone knew about Himmler's secret affair, including his wife. Upon learning of it, Margaret felt humiliated. The couple no longer loved each other, and after their separation, Himmler maintained a very close relationship with his daughter until the day he committed suicide by poisoning himself with cyanide at the end of the war. Another rogue was Martin Bormann, Hitler's brutal private secretary, who gained obscene power through his control over the Führer's schedule. Bormann was married to Gera Bu, a woman known for her beauty. It would be hard to say Bormann was bored with his partner. They had 10 children together. However, the beautiful Gerda was not enough to satisfy Bormann's insatiable sexual desire, and he had several mistresses. One of his favorites was the German actress Mona Behrens, with whom he fell madly in love, to the point that he confessed the affair to his wife. Although Gerda was a strong-willed woman, her reaction was surprising. She supported her husband's relationship, insisting that Mona move into their home. Her idea was that man would be sexually available to her husband when Gerda was pregnant. Gerda even proposed a contract that would grant her husband's mistress the same rights she had as the legitimate wife. She even wanted to propose to Adolf Hitler a law allowing Aryan men to have 2 wives. Obviously, this was too much for Mona, who broke off the romance with Bormann, instead of having a twisted sexual relationship with one of the top Nazi officials. She chose to work long hours in a weapons factory. After the Second World War, she became a successful actress and married the set designer Karl von Ehn. In the 1960s, she was banned from acting in films after her romance with Bormann became public. Although she continued to perform in theater, and if we're talking about a fondness for actresses, it's impossible not to mention Joseph Goebbels, the skilled minister of propaganda of Nazi Germany. He was one of Adolf Hitler's most loyal collaborators and a fervent advocate of Holocaust, in addition to practically creating the entire modern theory of political consulting. But besides wielding immense power, Goebbels had an unmatched sexual appetite. Describing all his affairs here would be impossible, so we'll mention the most notable ones. Goebbels was in fact married. He wed Magda Rittel in 1931, who at the time was married to Weltindustrialist GA, whom she cheated on with Hitler's advisor, but their relationship was very strange. As later became known, Magda despised Goebbels and was truly in love with Adolf Hitler, who is believed to have returned her affections, although they never had sexual relations. Reportedly, Magda married Goebbels to be close to Hitler. Despite this, the couple had 6 children. Goebbels also adopted Harold Quandt, Magda's son, from her first marriage. Goebbels was aware of Magda's feelings toward Hitler, and although somewhat jealous, he made sure to get even with his wife. In the film industry, the Minister of Propaganda was known for sleeping with countless aspiring actresses. If you wanted a major role in a film, you had to pass through Goebbels's bedroom. His obsession with women became problematic when he met the Czech actress Lida Berova. With whom, he had a passionate love affair between 1937 and 1938. Eventually, Goebbels told his wife Magda about his Czech lover. He was even considering fleeing with Lida to Japan. The affair was so intense that Magda went to Adolf Hitler and asked for his support. The Führer ordered Goebbels to stop his sexual escapades, claiming that his minister of propaganda had to set an example of the image of the perfect family. The Nazis destroyed the leader's acting career. The Gestapo followed her everywhere and made sure to defame her in every possible circle. Although she starred in some Italian films, Lida spent the rest of her life struggling to maintain her acting corrupt metal career. Corrupt metal, the sinister skull rings of Himmler's lodge. Among the strangest luxuries of Nazism, we find the bizarre decorations that Hitler and Himmler awarded to decorated officers. Among them were 3 that still hold great historical value due to their design and symbolism: the skull ring, the curved sword, and the honor dagger. The SS honor ring, better known as the skull ring, was a decoration of the Schutzstaffel. However, it was not an official state recognition, but a personal gift awarded by Heinrich Himmler himself to distinguished members of the SS. It became a highly coveted and sellable decoration, and even during Nazism, counterfeit replicas were made. The skull ring was initially awarded to senior officers of the SS Old Guard, of which there were fewer than 5,000. Later, It was extended to all SS members who graduated from the Janka schools and other SS training centers. Each ring had the recipient's name, the date of the award, and Himmler's signature engraved in the inside. The ring came with a standard letter from Himmler containing a general message in which he specified that it should only be worn on the left hand on the ring finger. In the letter, according to Himmler, the ring was a constant reminder to be ready at all times to risk our life for the life of all. As the SS expanded, many did not manage to obtain the ring. So, some SS members and police officers commissioned local jewelers to create unofficial versions. If an SS member was dismissed or retired from service, their ring had to be returned. In 1938, Himmler ordered that all rings belonging to deceased men and officers be returned and stored in a chest at Wurzburg Castle. This will be a commemorative monument symbolizing the continued membership of the deceased in the SS order. The symbolism of the ring reflected Himmler's interest in Germanic mysticism and included the Totenkopf, death's head symbol associated with the cult of death, and Armen, and runes tied to Germanic paganism. The ring was designed by Karl Maria Williget, an Austrian occultist, and manufactured by the family jewelry firm Otto and Carolina Gar of Munich. A sig rune to the left and right of the skull, framed by a triangle, represented the power of the sun and conquering energy. A hagel rune, symbolizing faith and the camaraderie idealized by the organization's leaders, was also included. The esoteric meaning of the Hegel rune was, according to Guido, enclose the universe within you, and you will control it. Other runes related to protection against evil and salvation, and the classic swastika completed the iconography engraved on the ring. Over the years, rings with other engraved runes and varied symbolism have been found, but they are believed to be replicas made by local blacksmiths at the request of officers who had not received one from Himmler, or even replicas created in the postwar period. In October 1944, Himmler ordered the halting of ring production and decoration, and all remaining rings, approximately 11,500, were sealed in a hill near Spurg. By January 1945, 64% of the 14,500 rings manufactured had been returned to Himmler following the death of their bearers. Additionally, 10% had been lost in the battlefield, and 26% were still in the possession of their wearers or their whereabouts were unknown. The exact reasons why the SS leader made these decisions are unknown, but it is believed the rings were part of Approbate Lodge that he sought to impose behind Hitler's back and later regretted in the face of the regime's collapse. Icons of Avilicans of evil. The luxurious swords and honor daggers of the SS, alongside the enigmatic skull rings. SS officers were also awarded elaborate swords and daggers as formal tokens of recognition for their service or accomplishments. The SS honor sword, a straight ceremonial weapon, was worn with the SS uniform between 1935 and 1945. First introduced in 1935, it was designed by Karl Debicke, Himmler's personal art and design advisor. The sword featured a long, slender, straight blade, available in different lengths to suit the wearer's height. Its hilt had a D-shaped knuckle bow and a black, ribbed wooden grip wrapped in silver wire, with an inset disc displaying the SS runes in lightning bolt form. The scabbard was coated in black enamel with decorative silver fittings at both ends and was often paired with an aluminum braided knot adorned with black SS runes. The sword was awarded to selected SS officers, along with a certificate personally signed by Himmler, recognizing exceptional merit, or to graduates of SS officer training schools. Non-commissioned officer versions were similar, but lacked silver adornments, reflecting their lower rank. A rare variation featured a Damascus steel blade, prized for its distinctive veining and remarkable strength. These swords were extremely uncommon, usually reserved for senior SS commanders, influential businessmen, or statesmen holding at least the honorary rank of SS Obersturmbannführer, often presented on recipients' 50th birthdays, earning them the nickname birthday honor swords. The more frequently distributed awards were the SS daggers, first introduced in December 1933. Following traditions established by the Reichswehr and Reichsmarine, daggers were presented annually on November 9th in ceremonies marking the official founding date of the SS. These honor daggers, worn as part of the dress uniform, were inspired by 16th-century Swiss designs. The wide, long blade with a spear point featured a central ridge, and the engraved motto "My honor is loyalty." Both guard and pommel were nickel-plated, and the handle included black inlays, a silver-parted eagle, and the SS emblem. The scabbard was glossy black lacquer with a silver tip and mount. Daggers went through several production iterations. The first generation 1933-1935 included the manufacturer's logo, a polished ebony handle, and Roman numerals on the guard indicating production cities: I for Munich, SU for Dresden, and TH for Berlin. The second generation 1936-1938 added an Urzum double tag code, removed the Roman numerals, and featured burnished or black painted scabbards. The final production 1938-1942 retained the Urzum code, a black painted scabbard, and an inlaid eagle insignia, often of aluminum or a lower cost metal. A special variant existed for the SS Old Guard founding members or those who joined before Hitler's 1933 rise, identical to the first-generation dagger, but with a chain of rectangular plates decorated with Totenkopf skulls, SS runes, and an additional silver swastika ornament. Like the skull rings, these daggers were frequently presented in person by Himmler. Some surviving daggers even bear the inscription Himmler, indicating personal appreciation by the SS leader. While outwardly similar to standard officer daggers, these rare versions were crafted with superior materials and are now highly valued collector's items on the black market. Production of honor daggers ceased in 1942 due to wartime material shortages, as resources were redirected toward weapons and ammunition.